The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
So hi, everybody, and welcome to the May session for the Women in Technology virtual group. We're really glad that you decided to join us today. As you can see, our virtual group's motto is encourage, energize, and empower, and that's one of the things that we try to do by hosting these webinars every month is to highlight women speakers and what it is they do in the PASS community. We have two sponsors. It's an embarrassment of riches that we have two sponsors that help us do what it is that we do. And today we will be giving away two $75 Amazon gift cards, one from each sponsor. So I will, you should get an email from me, and then you should get a follow-up email in about a week from PASS HQ. So once you hear from me, if you don't get that email from PASS HQ, follow up with me and let me know, just to make sure. You can always find this session later and all of the other sessions we've done over the last 2.5 years on our YouTube page, and you don't have to memorize that link. You can go search for PASS WIT and you will find us. The WIT homepage, witsqlpass.org or witpass.org, lists all upcoming webinars that we're hosting. And there are a couple of different sections on the page, but it also lists any women who are speaking at upcoming SQL Saturdays. So we like to shine a spotlight on them as well. If you're not a member of the virtual chapter, you can join by going to pass.org, go to My Chapters and join. You'll get our monthly newsletter. I promise you that we won't harangue you with a bunch of emails, but the newsletter contains sometimes links that we find interesting, stories that you might want to hear. And of course, follow us on Twitter at PassWit or follow the PassWit hashtag. We always tweet when these webinars are coming up. We tweet SQL Saturdays and then sometimes other information that's happening with SQL Family. PASS Summit is coming up 2018, and our user group has a discount code. It was included in the last newsletter. It should go out in the next newsletter as well. It will save you $150 off of registration. And since early bird and other discounts are over, that money's probably going to come in handy. But that is a 0 after the S and a capital O right before the 9. So to make that easier. There's only one SQL Saturday coming up this weekend, and that's in Finland. There are several more in May, and I'm incredibly pleased at how many women speakers there are in Dallas and Atlanta. New York City has 2. I think it may be a smaller event than Atlanta and Dallas, so don't judge them by their size. Coming up, in June, there's 2 webinars that you can attend. Melissa Connors, To Compress or Decompress, that is this session, and that's on June 6th. And on June 20th, Angela Tidwell is going to do a soft skills user group. She's kind of a new speaker. She just started this year, so I'm really pleased that we can highlight her with a webinar. Today, we're going to talk to Julie Koesmarno. Boost your analytics with machine learning for SQL Nerds. I had several people reach out to me after seeing this session somewhere else and say, you've got to get this for the WIT group. And my response to them was, I'm already working on it. So we got this scheduled for this month, and I'm so pleased that Julie is here with us today. I am going to go ahead and turn things over to her. Julie, as we go, people are welcome to ask questions. Do you have several points built in for people to ask questions? Do you want me to hold those to the end? How do you want those handled?
Thanks, Ree. I will pause for a few during the session. And I will ask if there are any questions, and then we'll go from there. Does that sound good?
Yes, so I actually have one question already. That are the slides going to be made available? I know there's a lot of demo in this as well, but will the slides be made available?
Yes, that's right. It will be made available.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, I will be muted unless you need me.
Okay, sounds good. I hope everyone can see my screen. All right, so welcome everyone to this session. Thank you so much, Ree, for the introduction. That was very lovely. I want to set up for the demo because it does take some time from what you send me for this demo to get processed into my little system. So I'm just gonna kind of pause a little bit here so that you can see the screen and try to do this from your machine. So send me an email. That's my email address over there. And then make sure that you put in the subject SQL Froyo in this format, exactly the same letter casing, and then attach the picture. Don't embed it, attach it. If possible, make it as small as possible, like, thumbnails usually best. And it should be a picture of a person and like a passport photo size kind of thing. So what I'm going to do is I actually had fun building this demo because I was thinking when I was thinking about this demo, I was thinking, hey, wouldn't it be fun if I actually have a shop, maybe like a frozen yogurt shop, because I love sweet stuff. And then I can grow my business, and I want to grow the business by selling more toppings on the frozen yogurt. And then what if I could do some sort of machine learning for this and detect whether my customers are likely to buy toppings on the frozen yogurt, so like upsell kind of scenario. And yeah, so I built an app, and for now, I'm asking people to send me your picture or someone else's pictures, so that I can detect whether you will likely buy a frozen yogurt or not. So more on that later. So I'm just gonna get started to the beginning. Okay, so just give me a moment. All right, so you've seen my screen earlier about the demo, so I want to get started to the beginning here. So my name is Julie. I'm a program manager at Microsoft. I've been so lucky that I'm working in a business analytics space. I have so much passion with data and analytics, and I'm super happy that I work in the Azure Data Group, helping the other product managers to how to essentially use analytics, use data to better the products, to delight customers, and it's been super awesome. I've recently written a book as well with Thomas Kastrun, who's actually one of my good friends based in Slovenia. He's an expert in R, and I'm super blessed to have the opportunity to write this book with him. I learned a lot from that. So here's the book that I was talking about. If you go to PACT and then search SQL Server 2017 Machine Learning Services with R, or my name, or Thomas Kastrun's name, you should be able to find me or find this book. And then I think there is a special discount, I think 29% discount or something like that. So go check it out. So I want to get started with this session. So there are 4 topics that I want to cover. The first one is why machine learning, how to operationalize machine learning with SQL Server, some tips and tricks and resources. So this demo or this session is intended to be level 200. So if you're already familiar with SB execute XML script, you're already productionizing that, then this session might be a little bit too slow. But if you're getting into using SQL Server and R together, and you have some basic experience with R, this will allow you to learn more about what you can do with SQL Server and R together instead of doing it in silos. So, all right, so why machine learning? So as a program manager and have a lot of passion, I have a lot of passion in product management. I find that it is quite important to run business when we know what products to build and how to delight customers. So that's one of the reasons why I'm getting into machine learning as well. I'm not a deep expert at it, but I could continuously try to educate myself, and that's what we do in technology, right? We always try to strive to understand what's going on around us. So in terms of delighting customers, from the product management perspective, we want to build creative products and or services, and we want to be able to allow better engagements with other partners, customers. So it makes sense. Machine learning makes sense there because it helps us to build more intelligent solutions that enable differentiation. So that's from product side of it. So that's kind of like I'm giving you a bit of a view of my world from the product perspective. Now I'm going to give you a bit of a view from the operationalization perspective. So some of you may be working in the sort of like the operationalization operational world, like you work as a DBA and you want to automate things. And it is possible to do that. So before you start working on a data science project or anyone engaging with data science project, always think about what is the goal for this. It could be just learning and checking it out, and that's fine too. But it could also have really significant business outcome or business impacts. So always think about it before you embark on data science projects. So let's get started into the operationalizing machine learning in SQL Server. So before I get into that, I want to pause briefly and talk about the R language. I started learning R maybe around 3 years ago, and it's been a very slow learning as well. So I pick it up and I dropped it a little bit, and then I pick it up again and drop it again, because life happens. Sometimes I don't get a chance, or as much as a chance as I used to when learning language, like full month and just deep dive into it. So R is one of those languages that when you pick it up first time, you might get a bit frustrated, but after a while it's like, I can make sense of this. If you're coming from the statistics background or mathematical background, it makes a huge difference in learning R. Even if you're not, that's fine too. It's actually pretty easy to learn. There are a couple of really good websites where you can learn more about R. One of my favorite ones would be the analytics video. So that's one of them. And then the next one is Coursera. I'm actually working on the Coursera. I started learning from Coursera about R, and that has been super useful because it gives me background on not just R, but also the mathematics background related to machine learning. So that's been useful for me. So if you're new to R, that's how to get started, or some tips on how to get started. R in itself is actually an old language, and it's been used worldwide. I'm from Australia. I live in Seattle now, but there are quite a lot of data scientists based in New Zealand who uses R. So I sometimes have a chat with those folks, especially back in my college back then. Anyway, so if you are new to R, there are a couple of things that I want to, or maybe not R specifically, more on the data science perspective. There are a couple of things that this is a very basic ones. There are a couple of things that you need to know. When we break it down in terms of machine learning or data science work, usually it requires, obviously after you know the requirements, usually it requires you to retrieve some data sets, do some sort of cleansing, transformation and all that. So, this second step here, perform data munging, and then you can start doing the training and then scoring, and then do the prediction. So this is kind of like the very, like if I have to make it, super basic, this is kind of the essential bits of data science, so predictive modeling. So what it looks like, let me just go to, just a second. Oops. Okay. Sorry about the wait. Let's see. There you go. So you should now see my screen with Visual Studio. showing RTVS. So this is R tools for Visual Studio. So I'm going to show you a little bit on R first, and then I'll show you how to integrate that as part of SQL Server. So before I dive into the data science part of it, let me just show you how easy it is to use RTVS, because some of you may not be familiar with this. Some of you who have used R may be familiar with RStudio. So I quite like using RTVS just because it's super easy to integrate with database projects that that comes with Visual Studio or SSDT. Anyway, so what I'm doing here is just calling the two libraries, ggplot2 and coreplot. You can see here that my coreplot library hasn't been installed. So what I do here is I can run an install command, or this is super useful if you're new to R. Just go to the packages here, and then this will show you a list of packages that have been installed. And then I just so happen to know that it's called coreplot. So I'm gonna go to available, and then you can click install, and that would actually just run the install packages in the working directory here. So now that the packages have been installed, I can call this again. So in R, you can call a data set or a variable. So in this case, I already have a variable called empty car. So this comes standard with R already. And this gives you just a kind of like a table view of empty cars. So nothing fancy, just a list of cars and then the different columns. And then afterwards, you can do a summary of A, which is what the empty cars is called. So apologies, let me just go back a step. I can assign a variable, so empty cars to A, like this, and then call summary A. And that will give me a summary of the table. I could also call summary empty cars, and it will do the same thing. So what this is good is from the data analysis perspective. So before, it's actually kind of part of the data science too, where you want to understand more about the data set that you have. And a lot of the time, you want to know what does it look like and what is the distribution. So this allows you quickly to calculate all the minimum, median, mean, first and third quartiles, and maximum. So it's super easy to use. Like you don't have to calculate all the different statistics aggregations. Then on top of that, you can run plot empty cars, which is actually shown on the right here. So I can clean that, and then let's do this again. Now, I know the picture is a bit small. What you can do is, expand it like this, then the picture becomes a bit bigger. So this allows you to sort of understand the correlation between all the columns, sort of from visually. Obviously, it's not the easiest way to do this right now, but you get the idea. You get to see some graphical view of the data set. And then if you do the correlation plot, this is probably a little bit easier than what you saw earlier, where it tells you that, okay, so the deepest the red, the inversely correlated they are. The deepest the blue, the more correlated they are. So MPG and MPG, so you can ignore this because obviously they always have the same value. But MPG to cylinder, so the higher the MPG, the higher the MPG, the lower the cylinder, or vice versa, and likely the horsepower, and this is, I think, the weight, and so on. So you get to quickly see, oh, okay, what are, say, for example, assume that I'm interested to know or do predictive modeling. I want to sort of guess the MPG based on the other variables. This allows you a quick view of which variables that are strongly correlated to the value MPG. So I would probably pick something like cylinder, display horsepower, and then the weight, and potentially add the dread of VS. So this allows me to kind of quickly try which features or which variables that I should be using as part of my machine learning equation. You can also do really good other data exploration work visually. So this one here is just using the qplot function to map the relationship between petal width and the sepal width, and then just show visually using the dot charts. The dots here. How the species are clustered together, so you can see quickly the characteristics. So it allows you to explore data really, really easily. Okay, and then you can also create a function. So as an example, I have this function called my array summary. And then what I can do is say you've defined that function, you can right click and then say, I want to pick the definition. What was it like? How was it defined? So you can quickly see that this is what the definition of that function is. So this is one of the reasons why I love using RTVS. I can combine, I can use R. I can do most of the things with, plotting, with exploring variables. So these are the variables that I have defined. I can look at the plots. I can combine it with my other projects if I want to. And I can also check it in, make it build as part of my VSTS build, as an example, or VSO build. So it's good in that perspective. Now, I mentioned earlier, so if I go back to the slide deck here, let's see. I sort of talked about this, but I paused and went back to the R to explain about R, right? So let me go back to it again, to the data science sort of part. So this is what life would be like if I wasn't using SQL Server and R today. So I would be doing all the training outside of SQL Server. So I'm using R, and I would be running the predictive analysis here. So from the first step on the slide deck, you saw that I was retrieving the data. So this is the step of retrieving the data. And then I do the model training here. So I'm using logistic regression. Obviously, there are certain algorithms that you may want to use. So instead of logistic regression, you may want to do linear regression or boosted tree model, etc. So you can do that. But in this instance, I decided to use logistic regression because it makes sense that way. And then I define my equation. So in this instance, I actually have the predictive modeling for my SQL for your demo. So where the like toppings is determined by the age, the gender, and the emotion. And then it would do the evaluation, do the prediction, and then I'm also evaluating the RAC curve, so how accurate it is, do the plotting. Once I'm happy with it, I do operationalize it, meaning that I actually store the model inside SQL Server so that I can reuse it. This last step is the key, or one of the keys here, where if I didn't have SQL Server and I couldn't store my model there, then I would have stored the model somewhere else embedded in the application. So I'm going to pause right there and then see if there are any questions.
Oops, not yet.
Okay.
No questions.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I'll continue. So I showed you what an R script would look like in terms of data science and doing predictive modeling. Some of the challenges are this data movement. So imagine if I was working with my training set, maybe 100 records or 1,000 records, that's okay. My laptop can handle it. That's no problem. Imagine where I want to start increasing the train model to say 100,000 or maybe 1 million. Because R uses memory quite a lot, and if I'm a developer and I do this on my laptop, which only has probably 8 gig, I will be starving the machine. In fact, I was doing I was doing this simple predictive analysis only with like 19,000, and it took 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and I got too impatient. So that's one of the challenges. You move the data, and it's it gets stored in memory, and it becomes really slow. And then to deploy it, it means that you have to deploy it as part of the application. You cannot deploy it with the data. And then you may be, really good with the data development side of it, or database develop. Your work is as a database developer or data scientist, but you may not know like C# and how to integrate that well. So that makes it a bit challenging there. So essentially, to operationalize some sort of machine learning model before SQL Server 2016 is you will have SQL Server database sitting somewhere. You do the model training on your maybe local desktop, like what I showed you earlier, where I'm getting the data and spitting out the model based on the data. And then I would have to work with the application developers to embed whatever the model that I have got and somehow embedded in the applications. And then so that the application, whenever it receives new transaction and whatnot, will pass the new data into the scoring sort of logic and then output the predictions to the applications. So in my mind, it looks a bit like this, where it's super messy. And then or even if you can manage to get it, working really well, sometimes you get the bandwidth issue. Like, how do you transport like 1 million rows into your scoring system, as an example, either as training or either as to do the actual scoring itself. So at Microsoft, we started thinking, how can we make life easier as data science work is getting used more and more in businesses to bring up innovative technology. So to summarize, this is what the life was before, where you have the database sitting somewhere, and then the application and the intelligence sort of sit on its own. What we're doing here in SQL Server 2016 and above is where the database and the intelligence about the data sits together. And then the application just simply call the database to get the data, as well as the intelligent part of that data or the insights. So SQL Server R and machine learning services solve these problems. So in SQL Server 2016, we call SQL Server R Services. In SQL Server 2017, we call it SQL Server Machine Learning Services because we're adding Python language into it. So essentially, in SQL Server R Services or ML Services, we are reducing or eliminating the data movement within database analytics. So the R script can be executed inside SQL Server, and you can also store models inside SQL Server and then just call that model and do the predictive analysis. So someone else, so for example, the data science can maybe have his own environment, but he can share with you the newer models or the edited models that in production what you should be using. So it makes it easier to do this, essentially what I call change management of the predictive modeling. And on top of that, because generally speaking, SQL Server production environment has beefier or lives in a beefier sort of environment than just your simple laptop, it makes it possible to also achieve the enterprise scale and performance that you already have with your SQL Server environment. And you can use R in conjunction with the in-memory and column store indexes to achieve more performance. So more of this is actually covered in the book that Thomas and I wrote. We actually evaluated how you can combine with Polybase, with in-memory and column store indexes, and what the performance looks like if you actually didn't have any primary key as an example versus you have in-memory and column store index, etc. When you use in conjunction with R. So these are the steps before I dive into the demo again. These are the steps into deploying predictive analytics. So likely you will develop, explore, and experiment in your favorite R IDE. So in my case, it's RTVS. Sometimes I use RStudio too. And then you could, when you do this kind of development, likely you will just use like maybe a few hundred rows or 1,000 rows and whatnot, just to get the structure right, essentially. And then you can migrate or move this script to do the proper training model with much larger data set, and then train it and execute it as part of SP execute external script. And then you save that model in the database. Then when you deploy, so from production, so when you want to execute the predictive analytics, you call the SP execute external script with the R code to predict using the model. And then your apps is simply calling a stored procedure or like a wrapper that calls the SP execute external script. So it makes it just so much easier. You don't have to change anything on the application side, so less maintenance on the application side. Also likely less maintenance on the wrapper too. The only thing that you have to change is the underlying data that stores the model. So I think like the model table. So like I mentioned before, you can do like quote unquote change management of the data model. So you can have multiple versions of the model, and then you simply pick the ones that you feel is the best model to use in production. So that is super awesome. So that's in SQL Server 2016. If you're using SQL Server 2017, it is so much easier. Again, you don't have to know anything about SP execute external, even external script even. You can just call the predict syntax to natively predict with a model, and it's super fast as well. So I'm going to show you that in a minute. So in SQL Server 2016, it's like really clean kitchen. I love clean kitchen, especially if they have cakes. Okay, so let me just pause for a bit. Are there any questions?
Not so far.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Ree. All right, so let me show you what it looks like in SQL Server. Just a moment. So I've got SQL Operations Studio. And let's see, I don't think I'm connected to this server yet. So let me just connect. Okay, let's see. Does it run? Perfect. Okay, so I'm connected to my server here. I mentioned earlier about my demo with SQL Froyo. So let's see what my data set looks like. So this is my Froyo sample. So this is my sample data set. And then from that, I actually created the predictive model from my R script that I showed you earlier. And then I stored the model in the model table. So there are two ways. In case I wasn't being explicit before, there are two ways of storing data or storing the model data into SQL Server. One is if you use SQL Server. So, one is using the R script like this, and then at the end, I'm just calling a wrapper stored procedure that stores the model into SQL Server. And the other one is to convert a lot of these, like this part here, call this part here as part of the SP execute external script. Obviously, you have to modify it. But what I like doing this separately in R is because it's a bit quicker iteration. So if I want to do the ROC curve and whatnot and change here and there, this is kind of a bit of my pre-step. Oops. And then I would execute. Let me just make this bigger. And then this is how to get the latest model. So essentially, I'm just calling the Froyo model and call the real-time, make sure that I'm using the non-real-time scoring because this is the SQL Server 2016 version. And then predict the the likelihood of choosing topping when the age is 20, and if it's a female, and emotion ID of 8, so it's a scale of 1 to 10, it is being nearly happy. So then the output here is 0.89. So it's about 89.57% likelihood of buying the toppings of SQL for you. Now, this is the step if you are using SQL Server 2017 and above. So what I'm doing here is simply get me the latest model where I'm using the real-time scoring, because SQL Server 2017 predict function can only use the real-time scoring model. And then so what I do here is saying that I want to do the prediction using the model, the latest model here, this part here, and then I'm going to fit in with this data. So at the moment, I'm just using a static value, so age of 20, female, emotion ID of 8, and then give me the prediction outcome here. So let me just run that, and quickly, voila, you get age of 20, female, emotion of ID of 8, and then because I'm using the same model, one is with the real-time scoring, it's also 89.57%. And I can quickly create or wrap this as part of a stored procedure. So that way when I execute it, so this is like, my application can call this stored procedure and then get the value of 85.41%. Okay. All right. So I'm going to pause briefly there and see if you have any question.
I do have a couple of questions, so let me pull that screen back up. So someone asked, is there an advantage or functionality in using Visual Studio rather than RStudio for this?
Some of the advantages. So let me just bring my RStudio. Sorry, let me just bring my Visual Studio back up here. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm using RTVS right now. I have used RStudio for 3 years. I have used RTVS for 2 years now. So a couple of things that I like about RStudio is that it is quite strong in terms of support from the community, so it is continually developed. What I liked about RTVS is the fact that I can integrate with any other projects that I have, including database projects. So it makes it easier to do kind of like a VSO build. Let me see if I can quickly jump to my VSO site. Is there any other question while I load this up?
And then somebody asked if we would be able to get a copy of the scripts or the database that you used.
I will try making it available. It should be doable. There are a couple of things related to. So what I have done here is I've got a couple of CLR stored procedures, so we'll just have to be mindful about that because it may require the actual C# library as well. So let me try. Let me try on that. Any other ones?
No, that's it so far.
Okay. All right. So let's see if I can open up my visualstudio.com. Of course. Okay. Let me try again after I finish the presentation and see whether it will give me a better outcome. All right, so let me go back to the slide deck. All right, so what I have explained to you quickly earlier with the from SQL of Studio is this part here where I've pretty much wrapped the model training separately and the scoring separately. So when I call, give me the prediction of the likelihood of buying frozen yogurt, it's this part here, right? So actually, before I go there, let me see if I can do something quickly. Let's see here. Right. Apologies for the delay. So while I'm doing this, can anyone sort of, it's a bit harder to do this over online. Does anyone use R today already? I know that there are some questions related to R Studio and RTVS. Can someone, ping on the chat message and let me know?
So I have several people that answering that they're either using R Studio or that they're using it a little bit.
Okay, sounds good. So if R Studio is working well for you, use that. If you're willing to try something new, then try RTVS, especially if you're using Visual Studio 2017. Give that a go because it's a bit more stable than the Visual Studio 2015 version. So let's see if I got this. All right, this is what I wanted to show earlier. So in SQL Server 2016, if you want to do the prediction inside SQL Server, you would need to do the SB execute external script where you unserialize the model. So the model is actually coming from the Froyo model here. In this case, I'm just selecting any one of them. And then this one is more like a debugging script where I'm, doing the print summary mod. And then I'm doing the actual predictive analysis here, and then I'm outputting it. Let me know if anyone in the audience want me to break down the SB execute external script more. Otherwise, I will move on since we're kind of running out of time. Okay, it looks like I'm not hearing anyone. All right, so let me show you the script that I...
I'm sorry, Julie, did you ask me a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if anyone in the audience who wants me to break down this SB execute external script more.
Nobody has said one way. Oops, hold on. Of course, if you offer, they're going to say yes. Okay,
All right.
for the record, only one person said yes. I'm just...
Okay, all right, no worries. I will do it briefly. So where is my script? Hang on a second. There it is. So remember I executed this script. It's kind of like a wrapper start procedure where it calls the predict like toppings, age 32, female, and 10. So if you have a look, there is the like toppings and it's predicted 85.41%, right? And if you look carefully on the results, you can execute this from SSMS, by the way, and it will actually also output the same thing. And it tells you, hey, these things are executed, and then it talks about the coefficients and the p-value and how significant it is and so on. So what happened or why that happens is because inside the wrapper stored procedure, so which is this one here, I am actually calling SB execute external script. I passed in an existing model that I have stored in Froyo model. When I pass this in, the model that I have stored in the Froyo model, it's actually serialized. So when you want to store the model inside SQL Server, you have to serialize it first. But when you use it, you have to unserialize it first. So this is the R script that will unserialize the model, and then I do the debugging statement here, quote unquote debugging, to understand more about that model. And that's why the this thing is called here. Like that's why you can see the output here. So if you're running this in production, things like the debugging sort of statement, please don't put them in there because it will actually slow down. Especially if you're executing it against 1 million rows, then this might likely be executed 1 million times. So you don't want to execute this. So so to comment out in R, it's actually a hash. So that's what you do. what's next is, because I know that my model is using the revolutional R, that's a hard word to say this morning. I'm actually calling RX Predict to use the model and then pass the input data set. And this input data set here is based on this inquiry here, this variable here, because that's how it's mapped here. So the input data set here is essentially determined by this line here. And then ignore about out data because we're not doing anything with that. And I'm just calling the predictive value like toppings, and then I'm outputting the data set or the outcome into output data set here. And then this is again yet another debugging statements. I could actually leave this out too. So the output here, I'm producing it as at age, at is female, at emotion ID. Sorry, let me correct that again. The input, another input that I have provided is the model, which is this guy here. And then the age is female, emotion ID is actually part of the inquiry here. It is a little bit complicated. All these parameters is actually mentioned here. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So just to wrap it up, what I'm saying here is that in this sort procedure, I'm executing SP execute external script where it calls an R script. And there are several input variables, including the inquiry, which is defined as a kind of like a dynamic SQL with at age is female and emotion ID. And then I'm also passing in the model to do the predictive analysis. And then the results is actually this like toppings, which is going to be in kind of decimal value or float value. So that's how I get the like toppings of 85.4%. Does that make sense? I hope so. All right, let me go back to the slide deck here. Okay, so SP execute external script can be used for a couple of things. One is actually this path here, where I'm doing the training model and persisting the model, or I'm doing the prediction model and then just providing an output. The other path here is where I execute the SP external script and then I'm producing the data visualization output. So this is good for sort of exploratory sort of analysis, or if you're using, as an example, SSRS, you can call stored procedure, and then it will draw the diagram for you. To do that to do it more sort of visually in SQL Server, let me just connect to my script here. I'm in my server here, and then just run this. So this script here is quickly calling the white world importers or connecting to the white world importers, and then I'm just calling, I'm actually just defining the data set that I want to get from. And then I'm defining an R script here that I want to call inside of the SP execute external script. So quickly, what's going to happen is that with this value, which is the salesperson, which is the sum of the order count and total amount by salesperson and month, I'm trying to draw a plot of what it looks like. And obviously in the kind of binary format, it's going to look like this. But using SSMS, it's really hard to see. But in SQL Ops Studio, there is this chart viewer, and then you can go to chart type and image, and then quickly see what that chart looks like for the plot that I want to draw, which is salesperson by order count and total amount and monthly orders. So that way I can quickly see the correlation between salesperson and the kind of amount of sales that they're generating. So Hudson here, which is the green one, is generating more sales. So that's if you want to do data exploratory using R in SQL Server. It's doable. And you can use this as part of SSRS as well. All right, let me go back to the slide deck. Are there any questions?
not specific to what you just covered.
Okay, no worries. I will park all the questions since we have about 10 minutes left. So earlier I've asked you, hey, send me your pictures about so that I can help, so that I can predict if you're likely to buy toppings on the frozen yogurt. So this is the app. So this is what I'm trying to do. So that's me a few years ago. It says that I'm 86% likely to buy toppings on frozen yogurt. And we have Mr. Bean here, 15%, and Shirley Temple, 96%. And so let's see what it looks like in real life. Let's go here. Let's see. So I have a Power app that I have created a while back, and then this is the value. When I sent a picture via email, this is what happened. So this was me in 2016. Very generous in terms of age, which is good. After all, I built this and created the model. And then the next one here is Shirley Temple. It looks like from this image, it's age 11 and 93%. So let me refresh and see if anyone in the audience have sent anything. If not, then I will quickly try send my own little email here. Let's see. Oh no, a few of them didn't make it. What happened? Boo. Anyway, let's try if I can do this. Let's see. That is a bummer. I'm not sure why the prediction didn't work there. Always at demo time, these things sometimes doesn't happen as expected. Okay, so I'm an Avenger fan, so I've decided to do a few clips. Let's see what Thanos is like, and then click send. Hopefully it will take a few moments. In the background, so I'm gonna do a bit of cheating to make it a little bit, to make it to run a bit quicker. So let's see. Let's see here. So I still do use SSMS from time to time. Let's refresh this quickly. Let's see. Okay, the Thanos one is still not processing. Let me just pause for a bit and then see if I could quickly have it working in the background. All right, so as I said, I'm gonna cheat a little bit and see whether this works to speed up the demo. So what I've done is I've inserted a pre-calculated image. Let's see if it's showing. Aha, Thanos is showing now. Woo. Okay, so Thanos here is showing age of 46. So this is the one from the email that I sent earlier. And then this is my one that I have created earlier. There you go, Thor the Dark World.
I'm not seeing anything new on your screen.
Oh, sorry.
There we go. Okay.
Ah, there you go. Thank you. So this is the email that I sent earlier to myself. I'm trying to predict Thanos' age. Apparently he's 46. And then let's see what Thor says in the Dark World, age 40. And then let's say what he is in the next movie, which is a couple of years later, I think. Let's see what his age looks like. Come on. Aha, Thor Ragnarok, it's age 44. Okay, a few of the pictures didn't come in, unfortunately. All right. So that's my simple app that I've created. In the background, it actually my R script actually doesn't do the actual image analysis at all. I'm actually using CLR to call cognitive services to get the age and the gender as well as the emotion, and that's what I fitted into the app. And I actually had to use Flow to make it all stitched together. So from you sending me an email to having it entered into my SQL Server area, and then have the cognitive services to predict the age, emotion, and gender, and then also it will call the wrapper procedure that do the predictive analysis in R. So it is a little bit convoluted in that sense. And one of the reasons why I want to call it out a little bit is this. I am not an application developer, but there are quite a few tools out there where you're actually, if you work hard enough, you can manage to get as simple as this working almost all the time with my Power App application here. So let's go back to the slide deck because there are a couple of things that I want to cover before we end. So this is, like I mentioned earlier, how I actually managed to get it all working. And then some of the tips and tricks that I want to cover here. So when you're using SQL Server if you're using SQL Server 2016, when you set it up, make sure that you enable this R Services instance feature. And then if you're using SQL Server 2017, there are two machine learning services, R and Python, and these are what we call ML services. There is custom reports for SSMS, where you can where you can download and then add it to SSMS. This does a lot of the checks that is required to make our services working. So my suggestion is to download this and then make sure that you do the checks here before you get started with SQL Server and R or SQL Server Machine Learning Services. So when you think about SQL Server R Services, it is actually within the biggest group of the SQL Server extensibility framework. So there is host external runtime secure that run securely on SQL Server machine. There is resource governor configured to control it. So I have a DBA in one of the SQL Saturdays last time asking me, hey, I don't know how to set it up. Like, do I have to give it a lot of memory? Do I have to do some sort of, testing on or control the CPU usage, etc.? The answer to some of that, if you are coming from the DBA background, it's just like deploying any machines out there where you want to just really test it out. Give it at least 8 gig of memory. That's my suggestion. And then you can go from there. You can use Resource Governor to control the size of the CPU that it will use. And it is quite secure because it does the implied authentication here. So it's been, especially if you're working on GDPR and whatnot, this kind of helps you like a step towards that. It is very simple in SQL Server with the predict function. Unlike in 2016, where you want to do the predictive modeling, it's SB execute external script. In SQL 2017, it also supports the native scoring, which is actually runs faster. And you can also do the in-database package management using the XML library DDL. And then native scoring using the predict function works with the RX models only. In general, I actually recommend the RX one, usually because from the scale side of it, it actually runs a bit better and faster. Some of the do's and don'ts. Do develop or test in RTVS or RStudio. If you're using Python, then PTVS and other IDE out there. Make sure that you do the data processing and transformation. So, retrieving, selecting the data set. So, for example, like where date equals where date is greater than 7 days from now, etc. Do that from SQL Server. Don't do it from R. Take advantage as much as possible from SQL Server in terms of retrieving and doing the transformation. use the SQL Server features that are out there. So for example, column store in memory, polybase and whatnot, to integrate with RTPS, to integrate with R, not RTPS, to integrate with R so that you get the most out of it. And you want to manage the models in database wherever you can. Don't run R script as is. Don't embed secrets in scripts, especially if you're calling certain kind of API out there. Don't embed don't embed R script directly to SB executed external script because it won't run. You have to do some modification. And lastly, you want to leverage best of the T-SQL and R-Python and use the right tool to do such things. And these are the list of resources that I would recommend. Also go to Thomas Castron's website. He covers a lot of R and how to use R and SQL Server together. So I'm going to pause for now and leave this screen up in case anyone wants to take notes. Are there any questions?
Yes, give me 1 second. Well, a lot of people already know about the recording. Yes, the recording will be made available. I usually get it up before close of business today.
Okay.
Let's see. What are the and this was asked earlier, but you had moved on by the time I caught it. What are the advantages of RTVS?
Oh, I briefly mentioned that, especially when you are working with a lot of the other Visual Studio projects, like including the SQL Server database projects and whatnot, or C# projects, it just bundles it together, and you can do the VSO build automatically too as part of it. So let me see if I could make that work here. So any other questions while I'll try to load this up?
No, actually, that's it right now.
Okay. All right. All right. So if there are any other questions, I'm more than happy to take it offline. So there's my email address, and I'm on Twitter as well in case you want to contact me.
Awesome. Okay. I don't have anything else yet, at least question-wise. I do have the winners for the gift cards picked. And Gino Moronic is one. And I'm going to butcher your name, and I'll just go ahead and apologize. But the apology comes in the form of a $75 gift card. It's Rulai Lee. So Rulai asked a great question earlier, and Gina was actually absolutely the most attentive one, because I can tell if you guys are paying attention or not. So that's how I actually chose this time to pick who the winners are. So you should hear something soon. But Julie, thank you very, very much for presenting for us today. And
yeah, no problem. My pleasure. Sorry, just quickly before we go, this is what I was talking about in terms of automatic builds, which you can do from Visual Studio and then VSO as well.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the great audience. Thanks for listening, and apologies for the earlier hiccups. But if you have any questions, you've got my email address, and thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, everybody. So, and if this is a topic that you're interested in, Melody Zacharias does a machine learning session that actually uses a lot of the same technology that Julie did here. She doesn't show you all the back end like Julie did, but she does show you that the predictive analysis of sending in pictures and using pictures. So I actually found it a really good precursor to what Julie was talking about today. So it may be available at PassWit. I'm not sure if that's the one she did for us or not. I'll have to go look. But hopefully that session is recorded somewhere. But again, thank you everybody for attending today. We really appreciate it, and we will see you in June. So thanks a lot.